There are so many cases where rehydration and good raw food can get rid of a whole number of ailments, complaints, symptoms. And we look at things in isolation. If you look at the whole body and how the whole body needs to stay well, we wouldn't have a lot of the health issues we have. It's my view.
Okay, so I've been asked by the gallery to reiterate the point that we're not giving any medical advice here. So check your own. If you want to start taking kernels of apricots, then do it upon your own source, from your own sources, advice-wise. So, in terms of food and nutrition, you know, presumably it's not desperately good at these homes anyway, is it?
No, it's not. As you get older, from what I've read, the thirst response diminishes. So an elderly person won't realise that they are actually dehydrating. And generally speaking, you know, the amount of fluid that you would have in any given day in a care home is quite small.
So a couple of cups of tea.
But that's the norm. So it's not that, again, it's the system that's perhaps not dealing with the real natural health of the person. And hydration is so important. And that's one of the things that I have complained about at times. But it's difficult, you know, they're in a system that doesn't recognise that perhaps. And the individuals within that system are working to the best of their knowledge as they've been trained. So it's a difficult balance.
So if people are in the position you were in, you know, if people who are watching, for instance, have got parents that are either contemplating going into a home or need to go into a home and have no choice, really, what advice would you give them?
Do some research on the web. Look at websites like Age Concern, Help the Aged. The Alzheimer's website is excellent. Even if your relative doesn't have dementia, the website is full of good information.
Alzheimer's is just one kind of dementia, isn't it?
Yes, I'm not really familiar with the different kinds.
Okay.
If you have it, you have it. It doesn't really matter what it's called. It's how it affects you.
Of course. Yeah.
But their website is very good. They have a forum as well on the website, which is useful to look at and contribute to. But there are lots of places you can go on the web for information. Sadly, going to social services, if you have any sniff of a savings account, will get you nowhere. You need to go to the charity websites, these sort of voluntary sector organisations for information. Some of the government sites are fairly useful. If you're looking at lasting powers of attorney, then the public guardianship office one is useful.
Is it important to go back to primary legislation, Simon? I mean, if you don't know what the law is, you know, what the statutes are, I have to be careful what I say now because John Harris is probably watching. So the statutes, rather than common law, if you don't know what they say, then you can't really take a view, can you? So is it important for ordinary members of the public to go back to the law and go, because you go online, you can read any act, can't you?
Yeah, the trouble is there are so many acts, you've got to make sure you're looking at the right one. And it is difficult because if you've got 5 NHS acts...
And then you've got precedents as well, which change.
You have, that's which is about
like
interpretation.
The Cochrane case.
Exactly. It's always good to go back to basics with these things, though. What is a primary source? What does it say? And then move that going forward. But it's rarely at that level do we have the problem. The greater problem is then in people's interpretation and how they write things up.
Okay.
And that's, Angela was talking earlier on about the assessment that I attended.
Yes.
And it became very clear to me that they were making assessments on her father based on notes written by a night nurse in a like log or diary at the nursing home. Now, the nurse was putting what she thought was right in there, and it probably was right. But
she was probably a qualified nurse, what do you think?
Probably. But at the end of the day, it wasn't the doctor. I said, at what point are you going to discuss this with his hospital doctors or his GP? And it was almost as if that was, yeah, I suppose we better do that. And I was very surprised because I would have naturally thought that was exactly the sort of source they would go
sort of
for.
moving in that direction.
You know, it wasn't the case. They weren't going to do it. And had I not said it, I wouldn't have believed it.
So you or whoever has got to insist that they take notice of the medical opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Of illness. Do you think if your father hadn't had cancer, you would have won?
No, I think I'd still be fighting.
Do you think you should have won?
Yes,
Given
absolutely.
that he had
Re-
Parkinson's.
Yes, regardless of whether
25
he has
years
cancer
plus.
or not, I think he should have been eligible for nursing care.
Yeah. Jackie in Scotland has written, on the subject of cancer, I reckon the convent treatment killed my father. Good show, Jackie, Scotland. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, Jackie. Thank you for the kind words. I imagine there are a lot of people in that boat, aren't there? How many people did you say were in nursing homes?
About 420,000 in the UK.
That's a huge percentage of the population, isn't it?
It is.
What, 60, 70 million.
And
It's growing.
We're an ageing society, aren't we?
Absolutely.
And care fees are rising faster than inflation, and you know, the whole bill for care is a real issue.
It's like the pension time bomb. This is the care time bomb, isn't it?
Yes, and the knock-on effect is often with our generation. It is our parents who are now in their 60s, 70s and 80s who are facing it, and we have to deal with the consequences. There's so many people now coming to my offices to discuss that thing that one of the contributors to the programme tonight has mentioned about, well, can we give away the property? There's lots of that sort of discussion going on, and that needs to be covered. People need to go and see a solicitor or the Citizens Advice Bureau to get good, solid advice about what they need to do about when they or their parents are getting older.
Can you get good advice at the Citizens Advice Bureau?
Yes, you can, but this area is becoming quite specialist. And if you don't get the right advice, then of course it can be disastrous.
And it was, if you do something wrong, if you sort of like, you know, take the house away and pretend it's, you know, should have, I don't know how you'd pretend whatever, but how you do that.
You can't hide it anywhere, really. No.
You can't hide a house. It's quite hard to do that. So you think, I mean, obviously you're not going to give a legal opinion on air here, but there are some perils in trying to hide the assets, if you like, or hide them off.
Quite right. And there's some very serious consequences to people who do that as well. It's best avoided at all cost. But the whole issue about how do you structure getting old, what have you got to do about inheritance, what have you got to do about inheritance tax, how do you best deal going forward so that the taxman doesn't get too much, the state doesn't get what it shouldn't get, and ideally those loved ones who are left get also what they should be getting.
I've got to say that I am surprised that any government can justify having taxes on people's assets when they die, because the assets that they have when they die have been
Already
tax
taxed.
paid. They're all tax paid, and that's their little nest egg, their pot, if you like. And then they go, right, let's have some of that.
Oh, we have situations where you pay tax on tax. If you take on a commercial
petrol.
premise, well, that's one. If you take on a commercial premises and you pay rent, you pay VAT on rent, you pay stamp duty on the VAT and the rent. Now, I know there's an element of input tax and output tax as far as VAT is concerned, but it's tax on tax.
Well, petrol is tax on tax, isn't it? Because you've got petrol excise duty, and then there's VAT on the excise duty.
Yes.
And, OK, we're getting off the subject a little bit about people in care homes. So